Thank you very much. There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order, honorable members. In accordance with Council Rule 2471, there'll be no notice of motion. Before we proceed to questions, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the President. Further, I would like to make the following remarks. The time for reply by President to questions, to a question is 5 minutes. Only 4 supplementary questions are allowed per question. A member who has asked the initial question will be the first to be afforded an opportunity to ask a supplementary question. The time for asking supplementary question is 2 minutes, and the time for reply to a supplementary question is 4 minutes. The supplementary question, as we often remind members, must emanate from the initial question. I will now take this opportunity to ask the President to respond to question number 1 by MS Shaikh from Limpopo to respond to the supplementary question later, but for now, I'll ask the President to respond to the question.
Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, honorable members, over the years, government has put in place various measures to strengthen border control around our country. These interventions culminated in the decision to establish the Border Management Authority that would take responsibility for all functions that are related to the management of our very broad borders. The Border Management Authority Bill was introduced to Parliament in the term of the 5th administration and is currently under consideration here in the NCOP. It is envisaged that the authority will be responsible for border law enforcement functions at the ports of entry around our country. In anticipation of the establishment of the Border Management Authority, transitional arrangements have been put in place to strengthen the overall coordination and management of role players at the ports of entry and the borderline environment. Once established, the BMA will ensure a more efficient processing of people as well as goods that move into the Republic around the 72 ports of entry into South Africa. It will strengthen our capacity to address border threats that could undermine the country's security and social and economic development. Another mechanism is the border policing strategy to ensure effective and efficient combating of transnational crimes and other crimes within the border environment. The strategy is being implemented in phases. In addition to the police and home affairs, the South African National Defence Force plays a critical role at the various ports of entry. Through the National Security Strategy, the SANDF has developed a long-term strategy view focused on specific threats to the sovereignty of the Republic and the authority of the state. As part of this strategy, 15 Army subunits have been deployed for border safeguarding. More, however, still needs to be done in this regard. The deployment of personnel needs to be augmented with resources such as high-tech equipment to cover such an extensive borderline, be it on land, sea, or air. We also continue to sustain long-range maritime and air patrols, particularly in the Mozambique Channel, and extend such patrols to the West Coast. The SANDF is working with those countries that share borders with South Africa through bilateral defense and security arrangements to improve coordination. Government has deployed a significant amount of resources and put in place extensive measures to control our borders, but the extent of the challenges and the sheer length of our land and sea borders means that much more still needs to be done. The Border Management Authority represents a paradigm shift that will elevate South Africa's border control to a new level of effectiveness. The challenges of illegal migration and cross-border crime require a range of responses. Central among these is better management of our borders and ports of entry, but as the recent attacks on both our own nationals and foreign nationals demonstrated, there is also a need for more effective and consistent policing within South Africa, improved engagement with affected communities, and cooperation with countries from which many of the foreign nationals come from. A good example of the latter is the agreements reached with the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria during the state visit of His Excellency President Buhari last week. The two countries agreed, for example, to establish a joint warning mechanism that will enable us to share information, to also respond to concerns that may be raised with a view of ensuring that we avoid the type of situation that we experienced a few weeks ago. Through the application of a range of complementary measures, I am certain that we will be able to address issues of illegal migration, drug and human trafficking, and other cross-border crimes. These measures are all meant to ensure that, indeed, we create a much safer environment for the people of South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Shaik.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and Dimasiari, Honorable President.
Dimasiari Abudi.
Honorable President, thank you for your response on the border control and security measures that are in place, as well as an indication of the number of SANDF units that are at the border, and this indeed is a measure that, or a sign that our borders are being managed. Though, Honorable President, in light of the tensions that have arisen in the continent following attacks on foreign nationals within our borders, has government started engaging other countries in the continent to develop a comprehensive way of managing immigration, And if not, why not? And if yes, what are the relevant details? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. We have started a number of initiatives to both engage with a number of role players on our continent as well as in our own country. In our own country, we're doing quite a lot to engage with diaspora forums that represents a number of nationals from other countries, and we are engaging in discussions with them at a number of levels. I have, as you well know, sent out envoys to a number of countries on the continent just to go and explain more fully and comprehensively what happened in our own country and also our own position in terms of setting out our values, in terms of setting out what we stand for. And in doing so, we have found great reception from a number of countries where our envoys went. They understood precisely what happened, and they also understood the steps that we were taking. In the course of doing all that, we felt as a cabinet that we should have a fact-finding mission that will come to our country and work together with a number of other people, including the HSRC, to exactly find out what really happened. And this we want to do with a view of avoiding these types of incidents into the future. We've also engaged with a number of our own people in discussions, as well as various communities where foreign nationals are currently residing. And all these are going to culminate in a process where we will be able to have a much clearer positioning in as far as handling the issue of migration. Migration is a huge challenge on the continent and globally, may I add. And the continent itself is in the course of discussing this matter, but it has to be discussed much more speedily. The problem, of course, is that as there are reactions from nationals against migrants from other countries, there are always issues of competition for resources, competition for services, and when that happens, it sometimes manifests itself through violence, which is what actually was a bad type of manifestation in our own country. So all these matters then have to be discussed, and as we discuss them, we are also going to rely on the wisdom of a number of people, leaders across the board, religious leaders, community-based organizations leaders, sporting leaders, because our sports were also affected in all this when our sporting teams were prevented from going to play in other countries. So we're utilizing a multifaceted approach to address this problem and this challenge. And we think we are making good progress. We think once the fact-finding mission also finally starts its work, it'll find that there's fertile ground in as far as information sharing and giving is concerned, and they should be able to come up with what I would regard as good recommendations. So we are on a good course to addressing this challenge. Thank you very much.
Honorable Dango.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. President, resulting from the wrong perceptions, many people died in Gauteng, but most of the people that died were locals and not foreigners as such. What programs has the presidency and the state put in place to address non-racialism, non-sexism, and democracy in South Africa to promote the society that we all wanted? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Part of the work that we are doing is aimed at addressing precisely what I call fault lines that manifest themselves through racism, even tribalism. During the course of these events, we also saw the ugly face of tribalism rearing itself And as you correctly say, Honorable Dango, there were a number of people who died. Most of them were South Africans. Only 2 foreign nationals died, which we are truly sad about, because there should never really be any loss of life. And violence can never really be justified. That results in the injury of persons and the loss of life. And it is for this reason that we are insisting that there needs to be more tolerance. There needs to be more understanding, and we need to be promoting the values that are enshrined in our Constitution of non-racism, even non-sexism, and non-tribalism. There should never be any form of prejudice that will be exercised or perpetrated against others. And it is for this reason that we are embarking on a process, a campaign really, of engaging all and sundry. As I said, religious organizations and a number of political organizations as well, so that we all are at one in as far as condemning violence, condemning intolerance, and promoting more and more that as South Africans we should be embracing one another, and indeed we should also embrace foreign nationals. What we are also saying is that, and this was so clearly and well articulated during my meeting with President Buhari, because he said he calls upon those from other lands, when they come to South Africa, they must obey the laws of the country. And similarly, we say South Africans as well must also obey the laws of our country. And if we all can commit ourselves to doing that, then everything becomes a lot easier. It basically means that if you're a trader, you should trade within the parameters of the laws of South Africa. You should not be an illegal trader. And if, for instance, you obtained a visa to come into the country, you should not suddenly just melt away and run away from the authorities in complete disregard for the laws of the country. So the rule of law is therefore important. It's another important aspect that we would like everyone to adhere to. And we want to inculcate this as much as we possibly can and spread a message of all our people, including those from other lands, to observe and abide by the rule of law. And if we do that, we're also then in a greater position to promote the values of non-racialism, non-sexism, non-tribalism, and also non-regionalism, because regionalism also seems to come into play in all this. So we want all those very negative attributes to be obliterated from the face of South Africa, so that South Africans must be able to live in peace with themselves, but also side by side with those from other foreign countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on over to Honorable Detroit.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you, Honourable President, you've mentioned that tribalism took place with the recent violent outbreaks in South Africa. I want to know if you agree with your cabinet members, Ministers Naledi Pandor, Mapisa Nkakula, Mr. Beki Cele, that the recent outbreaks of violence was merely criminality and not xenophobia. Thank you.
Yes, I am on record as saying South Africans are not xenophobic. We are not, and the acts that took place were sort of driven by criminality. And some of them were so criminal that people attacked certain shops and stores, and some of it was with a view of stealing the goods that are sold in those stores and took them for resale elsewhere in other stores. Now, that is sheer criminality. And whoever the store owner could have been, whether it could have been a South African or a non-South African. So that is a sheer act of criminality. And that is precisely what we are totally against. As it manifested itself, it manifested itself in a way that looked like attacks were being leveled against foreign nationals. But inherently, it was not to attack foreign nationals. It mutated into that. But what it then did, it positioned us very negatively to the world. The pictures that were shown to the world were that South Africans are attacking non-South Africans, they are attacking foreign nationals. And we were at pains in saying, we condemn criminality, but as it mutated and manifested itself in the form of targeting foreign nationals, we condemn that too. And it is for that reason that we sent envoys out, and when I sent envoys, we explained precisely this picture. And that is why the police then acted and arrested more than 280 or so people who were involved in acts of criminality. And those people will be charged, will be brought to book for the acts of criminality that they perpetrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question will come from Honorable Mikalakis.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Mr. President, the vast majority of Zimbabwean and Congolese nationals in South Africa are here because of political instability in their own countries. These are, the great majority of them, good people. Their leaders, however, are not. Yet your government over decades has made more effort through your soft diplomacy to be kind to these ghastly leaders than to be kind to the people of those countries. We have a duty to provide them with asylum, and yet Home Affairs officials seek bribes to issue documents, and not a single one of them have yet been fired for this. And they do exist. They want bribes in order to give the necessary documents for these asylum seekers. When will your government then start taking a strong stance against these human rights violators and in the interest not only of our own country, but also of the people of those countries who are our friends? Thank you.
It seems to be with your permission, Honourable Chairperson, to be a double-barreled question. The first part, I should say, I spent more than 6 hours with the Department of Home Affairs last week. It was a valuable 6 hours where they explained to me the work that they are doing, and I was hugely impressed with the commitment, the patriotism, and the loyalty that the majority of the civil servants who work for the Department of Home Affairs displayed, not only during the presentations that they were putting forward to me, but in me just observing some of the work that they are doing. One of the things that they have done is to set up an anti-corruption unit. Anti-corruption, or do they call it a counter-corruption unit, within the Department of Home Affairs, and it is dedicated to investigating corruption, and it has been able to identify a number of officials, and there are not many, who participate in corrupt activities, and it's an ongoing process. And I asked them, what do they do with them? They discipline them, and if the disciplinary process results in them being dismissed, so be it, but some are even charged, I am told. So I found that to be quite refreshing, coming from a government department, where a government department demonstrated that it is indeed within its own environment seeking to deal with corruption, recognizing that there is corruption. And the minister was informing me about another grouping of workers or civil servants who were also going to be dealt with because they had been found to be perpetuating or practicing corrupt activities. Now, with regards to the care that we demonstrate to asylum seekers, we have been informed by the UN High Commissioner of Refugees that we are amongst the very few countries who have a very clear policy that we put in place, because they have found, as they've examined us, that indeed when it comes to giving due care to those who seek asylum, who seek refuge to our country, we do subscribe and actually implement the precepts that are put out at international level. And that we should do, because when people leave their countries because the countries are under war or involved in war or there's strife, once they present themselves to our borders in South Africa, we are duty-bound in terms of international conventions to receive them, to accept them, and to start processing them. And the processing is an arduous process, but we have set up offices that do precisely that. There are reception centers that are aimed at doing precisely that. Our policy internationally is to promote human rights. We promote human rights, and we seek to work with various countries in the world, various organizations, and indeed various leaders as well. And from time to time, we do engage various leaders if there are challenges and problems that have a negative impact on human rights. It may well be that some may want us to stand on rooftops, on top of mountains, and shout and scream and condemn certain individuals or leaders. And we exercise engagement. We exercise an approach of discussing matters with a whole variety of leaders with a view of having an impact and an influence. This is an approach which we believe works best, and it is tried and tested, and we have seen quite a lot of success that's taking place on the continent. The continent is on the move with regard to observance of human rights, practicing democracy, and this is an Africa that is developing and that is moving forward. Some people may like it, some people may not like it, but Africa is moving forward. Thank you very much.
And it's at this point that we say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers. Of course, we continue to listen to President Ramaphosa at the NCOP right now.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Due to the urgent need for government to stabilize Eskom and to deal with energy demands of the country, especially in the wake of load shedding, Deputy President David Mabuza was appointed in February 2019 to lead the Special Cabinet Committee on Eskom. Prior to the elections in May 2019, the Deputy President regularly appraised Cabinet on the work of the committee, covering such issues as consultations with organized labor on the separation of functions at Eskom, improvements in coal supply, measures to address Eskom's financial difficulties, and progress made by the Eskom Technical Review Panel. With the reconstitution of all ministerial committees and cabinet committees at the start of the 6th administration, there is no longer a special cabinet committee on Eskom. Instead, Eskom is now a standing item on the cabinet agenda, where the Minister of Public Enterprises appraises cabinet on the progress that we are making in Eskom's turnaround efforts, in particular on cost curtailment, revenue growth, and functional restructuring. On plant performance, Cabinet receives reports on the implementation of the 9-point recovery program, which aims to fast-track improvement in generation, performance, and plant availability. Under this program, coal stock days have improved and are currently above the required minimum of 20 days. Government has taken bold steps to shore up Eskom's finances and also to lay the basis for longer-term sustainability. This is necessary because Eskom does not generate sufficient cash from operations to cover its interest payments, to cover its debt repayments, and also capital expenditure requirements. Eskom's financial challenges are mainly due to unsustainable operating costs that are caused by expensive coal contracts, high headcount, overall operating inefficiencies, high debt servicing costs, corruption in procurement, and the excessive costs of the construction of Medupi and Kusile. In the budget speech in February, the Minister of Finance allocated 69 billion rand to Eskom over the next 3 financial years. In July, the Minister of Finance presented a special appropriation bill for additional funding of 59 billion for 2029, 2020, and 2020 and 2021 financial years to further assist with the going concern situation of Eskom and other financial challenges. Government has proposed a range of conditions to be imposed on Eskom in order to receive this additional funding. These conditions establish certain requirements with respect to the entity's finances, operations, and governance. It is broadly accepted that Eskom's current structure is outdated. As announced in the 2019 State of the Nation in February, Eskom is in the process of being restructured into 3 separate subsidiaries. The restructuring of Eskom will be detailed in the special paper on Eskom, which is planned for release later in the month. Over and above the financial recovery, the newly appointed Chief Restructuring Officer is developing potential solutions for Eskom's debt. The process to appoint a new Group CEO will also soon be concluded. The Board of Directors of Eskom will be strengthened with additional members with the relevant technical expertise to lead the turnaround strategy for Eskom. Much progress has been made to stabilize Eskom since the load shedding earlier this year. With the publication of the special paper on Eskom and the implementation of its recommendations, we will shift from crisis management to sustainable recovery for Eskom. I thank you.
We'll now move on to the first supplementary question by D.R. Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. President, for your answer. But, sir, similar to your appointment of Mr. Mabuza, when you were the Deputy President and the leader of government business, President Zuma appointed you, specifically in December 2014, with, and I quote, overseeing the turnaround at Eskom. That was 2014. I believe that you failed the country and that you should shoulder the blame for the situation that we find ourselves in. Minister Gordhan is on record saying that Eskom was a state capture project. You were complicit. Why did you not intervene to save Eskom and the country's economy when you had the chance and you were given the full responsibility to do so?
Is that the question? Okay. So I was the leader of the state capture project. Very nice. Well, I guess one should be quite direct in answering the question because the honorable member is hallucinating a little bit. And in direct answer, I think what we have been observing with what's been happening in Eskom is that we've been dealing with a really deep-rooted problem of corruption and state capture. My own sense is that if there ever was an entity of government that was totally and completely captured, it was Eskom. And it was easy to capture because they were able to see how big it is. The biggest corporation in our country. It generates a revenue that is far above many other companies in our country. And once they set their eyes on Eskom as a target, they went in with a great deal of effectiveness. And quite a lot of what was happening there was hidden, and it is really only coming to light now through the various commissions that are now underway. Even as we had the war room, we could see there were challenges, and the challenges seemed to be more technical as well as financial, but it had to take a lot of digging to finally find that in the end some of the suppliers were overpaid, quite a lot of money was being siphoned out without even invoicing and all that. So let us pay tribute where tribute is due. Let us pay tribute to the work that the various commissions are doing to fathom exactly what has happened in Eskom. And in the end, when Eskom will be completely repositioned, because much of what we have been doing over this time is to seek to reposition Eskom. It's very easy to point fingers and to find people who are to blame. My own approach is let us all work together to try and reposition Eskom, because Eskom is too big to fail. It is far too important to fail, and it is far too important to do finger pointing. What we now need to do is to reposition Eskom and look at the restructuring that is ongoing. What I outlined here is something that we should all applaud and say we can now see the light of day. We can see that something is being done. We are going to appoint a CEO. We are going to add and augment to the board. We are going to deal with the debt. We're dealing now with the operational aspects, the technical aspects. We're working hard to complete the 2 power stations. And we're also having to deal with the challenge of non-payment. And a combination of all these give rise to a challenge that all of us should face up to and address with a view of finding solutions. And if ever there was a time, this is not a time for finger pointing. This is a time of trying to bring good ideas together to solve the problem. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Honorable Ghana.
No, na cancer, Mr. Mr. President, na metro kurno mirno ankarwa what the point scoring. But luck check us something, especially with the document that's coming from the Treasury, that Minister Mboweni has been spearheading. And one of the suggestions in that document is that the Eskom should sell some of its coal-powered power stations. And I want to check with you whether you agree with this. As a president, do you agree that some of the Eskom's coal-fired power stations should be sold off on auctions? And what are you going to do about it? And also, if it's going to be actioned, can you please give us a way in which your leadership and your presidency is going to make sure that this becomes a success, so that at the end of the day, we solve our energy crisis? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. No, namina na kenza swinene. Swivutiso leswi swi ta endla ku ri kota ku vulavula kahle hi twana ku ri Eskom leyi yi yisa kwina. The paper that is currently in discussion, that is being discussed, and I don't know whether you are one of those who did make any submissions, because there have been 754 submissions that were made to the paper that was released by Treasury. And they're working through all those submissions. And indeed, one of those proposals that were put up there is that we should consider selling off some of the power stations. Now, we have to decommission a number of power stations. You might know that some of our power stations are more than 37 years old. And once a power station reaches that life and begins to move towards 40 and more than that, it has really reached the end of its life and has to be closed. And in closing it, we then have another challenge to deal with the ramifications of the closure of those power stations. And we now have to deal with an issue we call a just transition, because they have to be closed and you cannot stop that. You then have to look at where those power stations are located, the workers who work in those power stations, the communities around those power stations. They've settled, towns have been built. Do you want those towns to become ghost towns or not? What are we going to do with giving the people around those power stations and workers a just transition and a migration forward? Now, clearly this gives rise to a number of proposals. Now, selling of power stations, we have to ask ourselves, which power stations will be sold? Are you going to sell the ones that are closing, or are you going to sell the new ones? And in my book, you are not going to sell the new power stations, because they are the ones that are the crown jewels of Eskom. And who will buy the old and aging power stations? You may never find a buyer, because they are aging and going to close. Unless somebody who will come forward and say, I will buy this power station and I will want to operate it for the next 20, 30, 40 years and breathe life into it and give the people of that, around that power station, a new lease of life, and I am entrepreneurial and I know how to sweat this asset, and I will involve communities, I'll involve workers as part of this scheme. Now you are looking at a different proposition. But inherently, we are saying we are not in the business of selling power stations. No. Because which power stations will we sell? And as we've been looking at the restructuring of Eskom, we've been saying, one, we are not privatizing Eskom. Eskom will be carved into 3 entities. The one entity will be generation. But we've also been saying in generation, we must already realize that there are quite a number of other generators of electricity. A number of other entities are already generating electricity. Some are doing it through renewable energy, wind power and sun power, and some are doing it through biomass. So there are quite a number of other generators. But in the end, Eskom will remain the main generator of electricity, and that must remain state-owned. While you accommodate a number of generators who will generate electricity and sell it into the grid, you should then also have a grid company that deals with transmission, and that too must be state-owned. Distribution is another entity that needs to be looked at, because a number of municipalities are distributors of electricity already. So you already have a different type of architecture when it comes to distribution. Eskom is the main player in distribution, but there are quite a number of municipalities that also distribute. So this whole ecosystem of generating electricity needs to be looked at in its full and totality. But what I'd like it to make clear is that we are not privatizing Eskom. We are going to be looking at smart partnerships that can be struck. It is possible that we can have a smart partnership with other entities on certain of, say, even aspects of Eskom. The smart partnerships is what we would promote whilst the state continues to have full control over transmission, yes, and on parts of generation. With distribution, the state will continue to play a role in distribution. So that is the architecture that is playing out. But the main important aspect is that we want partnerships with the private sector. The private sector is going to play a key role with us as we restructure this electricity behemoth that we have. It is when we involve the private sector that we will be able to modernize. That is when we will be able, yes, to embrace renewable energy technologies, because those technologies are coming at us fast and furious. But we also have to be responsive to climate change. Climate change is coming at us, and the private sector is the main player in climate change technologies, and we are also saying that Eskom must also play a role in climate change technologies. It must not be left behind. And it is for this reason that we say Eskom is just too big to fail, it's just too important for us not to ensure that it succeeds. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Next supplementary question goes to Honorable Matibe. But I see Honorable Ryder is up. Well, what's the question now? What's the point of order?
Point of clarity, Chair. Can I just ask, does that mean yes, Mr. President?
Please sit. Honorable Matibe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Rekodiwa pindulo zera zinekedzwa nga mu President.
Chairperson.
Please, yeah.
Rise on a point of order. In the rules, we make provision for a point of clarity. Why can't we have a point of clarity on something that's in the interest of the nation?
No, please proceed.
Ndolibuwa, Chairperson. Mapungwa Eskom President Richko Chimbila nas constituency zashui. Zvinera wana vadzirapo vakolera ngazvo chothoma. Ndi mapungwa uri mudhakasuko dhura. Ri funosedza uri samuvuso ri na pulane na dzau thusedza kha uri hezwo zwithu zwisikonadze. Ri khou dovha hafhu ra livhuwa phindulo ye vha i ṋekedza kha mafhungo o dzudzanyula Eskom. Tshiṅwe tshine ra funa u tsheka futhi ndi tsha uri musi ri tshi khou ita mushumo yo wo dzudzanyula Eskom, vhashumi vha ḓo kwamea u swika gai, nahone kha hezwo zwithu zwoṱhe zwi ḓo thusa hani u alusa ikonomi ya Afrika Tshipembe. Ndo livhuwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Honorable Chairperson, Ndiyalivhuwa Vho Matibe. Eskom recordingedza nga nḓila dzoṱhe uri ri vhe vhudzuloni havhuḓi uri i kone u bvelela phanḓa I ite mushumo wa u ḓisa muḓagasi kha Afrika Tshipembe yoṱhe. Nahone I ḓisa muḓagasi na kha Southern Africa kha mashango o fhambanaho. Ri khou lingedza uri ri tikedze, ri vhone uri na vhashumi vha kone u vha vho ima vhudzuloni havhuḓi. As I was saying, the issue of the just transition that we're looking at, as we now know, and I think it's become much more clearer also to a number of other people, working people as well, that as these power stations age, and it happens all over the world. These power stations are built to last for a number of years. And the problem is that the older they become, the more expensive to run they become, and the breakages become even more frequent, and you spend much more money to keep them going. And they come to a point where their life just comes to a dead end. And what we have to do in answering your question is collectively, and this is the conversation that we say should be embarked on. We need to define what that just transition is. Just transition is a buzzword around the world, and we are saying let's define what just transition is. It has to have key elements, and the elements have to be the socio-economic future of the places where those power stations are. And quite a number of them have become towns. What is the socio-economic future for them? We need to plan around that, but in an inclusive way. We also need to look at what happens to the workers who have been working in those power stations. Are we going to reskill them, upskill them, and are we going to open up new opportunities for them? Are we going to look at those areas as centers where renewables can actually be developed? And if they are, what ways are we going to embark on to reskill those workers so that those workers immediately migrate? Other countries have done so successfully. They've been able to create even more jobs where coal-fired or fossil-fueled power stations have closed down, and new sources of energies have come up. More jobs have been created. It is a difficult task. It's not going to be easy, and that is what we need to say to our people. But what we are saying is that all of us must embark on a process to define what the just transition is and to work towards that transition. I am one who is strong on ensuring that we should never get to a point where we have not spent time in defining what the just transition is and what that just transition will be in terms of taking care of the ordinary people who work in our power stations and who work in the towns that were created around those power stations, in the eventuality that those power stations will close. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Honorable B.
Ngiyabonga sihlalo wendlu. Ngibingelele kumongameli ohloniphekile. Ukudlondlobala kwalezi kweletu zika Eskom yikona okuyingqinamba enkulu ekuvimba ukuthi kube nozinzo ekusebenzini. Mongameli ohloniphekile, ingabe uhulumeni unalo yini iqhinga angasiza ngalo ekuqoqeni izikweletu komasipala nakubahlali abahlomula ngqo ku-Eskom? Nokuthi ungenzeka yini ukuthi kube namathuba omsebenzi ukuze kuliwe nale ngwadla yokuntuleka kwemisebenzi? Ngiyabonga sihlalo.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Ngiyabonga kakhulu kulombuzo obuzayo, ngoba eyona inkinga enkulu esinayo ukuthi umphakathi, abantu bakithi abasebenzisa ugesi kungakhokhi imali uma bewusebenzisa lo gesi. Bayawusebenzisa ugesi, makufanele ukuthi sikhokhe, bavele bamele emva bathi hayi imali asinayo. Lokho kwenza ukuthi iEskom le yenza ukuthi sibe nayo ugesi ingasabi nayo imali yokuyenza lo gesi. And kungakho ke isikweleti sika Eskom siloku siyakhuphuka siyaphezulu. Uma izinto zingashintshi siziyeka zibe nje kuzofika isikhathi lapho iEskom ngempela isikweleti sakhona sizoba sisikhulu kakhulu naye Eskom izoba enkingeni ingakwazi ukuthi iyenze ugesi nathi ke singabi na ugesi kube umnyama la eSouth Africa. Manje akufanele ukuthi kuze kufike kuleso sigaba. All of us need to know that when we use electricity, there is a cost to it. And we cannot just say Eskom itself and the government will carry the cost. We've embraced and accepted the principle of user pay, that the user of any service does pay. When we use our cell phones, I always use this example. When we use our cell phones and we talk for however long, we all know, even a small child knows that it costs money and you must pay. And the same applies when it comes to electricity, the same applies when it comes to water, and the same applies when it comes to a whole range of things. Now, this culture has developed, wrongly so, amongst our people that when it comes to electricity, the government will carry the can. We can continue using as much electricity as we can. Now, that is a wrong culture. We want to change that culture. The boycott culture is over. We are no longer in the boycott period. Boycotts were used as an effective weapon during the days of struggle. And it paid dividends. It got us where we are. Part of the instruments we used were boycotts. Now we must use paying to take our country forward. If all of us as South Africans want this country to move forward, we've got to pay our electricity bills just as much as we pay for our cell phone bills. I just don't understand why you would pay to talk on the cell phone like that cell phone was doing now. Maybe there's no airtime there. I just don't understand why we would pay for cell phones. And I cite cell phones because the cell phones are a new technology. We all new payers to cell phones. Many years ago, we didn't have cell phones. Now we have cell phones and we know there's a cost. We pay every month for our cell phones. And similarly, we must pay for our electricity and for our water. We're going, as a government, going to be launching a massive campaign to encourage our people to pay. And we're going to spread it throughout the length and the breadth of the country and call on all South Africans to pay their charges. But because we are a caring government, we have even gone to say there will be those indigent families who will have a number of kilowatts that they will be exempted from. But in the end, all of us as South Africans must pay. It is our duty, it is our civic duty, and it is our responsibility to pay. When it comes to creating jobs, we are working day in and day out to find ways of creating jobs, and part of the paper that was being referred to earlier is aimed at doing precisely that. How we can remove the constraints in our economy, how we can unlock the energy in our economy and to get our economy going and make sure that we create more and more jobs. This is precisely what we are seeking to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just to say two things, really. All of us know the rules that the cell phones should be off. Secondly, please raise your hands a bit earlier, because there are only 4 supplementary questions. Thank you very much. We'll move to question 3 from Honorable Koia to the President.
On a point of order, Chair.
Yes.
Honorable Makause's hand was up. Can we please correct this thing of selection of names, please?
We will try to the best of our ability from the chair to spread the questions amongst all of us as far as possible. But don't assume that because you have raised your hand is one of the 4.
Chairperson, we are not assuming.
No, thank you very much. We'll try our best.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move to question 3. Honorable President. Honorable President.
In response to the country's first recession in nearly a decade, in September 2018, I announced an economic stimulus and recovery plan to ignite economic activity, to restore investor confidence, and to prevent further job losses and create new ones. Most of the measures announced in the plan now form part of the government's medium-term strategic framework to 2024. Government has been tracking implementation of the plan and has reported progress in the February and June State of the Nation addresses. In the reprioritization of public spending to support growth and job creation, for example, the Land Bank has been allocated almost 4 billion rand over the medium-term framework period to support black commercial farmers. An allocation of 600 million has been made to support rural and township entrepreneurs. For critical posts in health, 28 billion has been allocated to a new human resource capacitization grant with 2,888 posts already filled. There have been additional allocations to public employment programs. These have also involved industrial parks and municipal infrastructure. More than 17,000 projects valued at over 174 billion rand are expected to be implemented by municipalities over the next 3 years. As part of township revitalization, 10 industrial parks have received new investments, including industrial parks in Botshabelo, Seshego, Isithebe, Komani, Vulindlela, Babelegi, Phuthaditjhaba, Sandria, Garankuwa, and Kuankua. Since the upgrade of infrastructure in the Botshabelo Industrial Park, for example, the occupancy has increased from 75 in 2015 to 82 in 2018. From 2015 to 18, it's increased right to 82%, with 90 new investors attracted to the park. Detailed work has been undertaken towards the establishment of the infrastructure fund, which includes elements such as blended finance, project preparation, and strengthened accountability and transparency. Government has set aside 5 billion rand over the medium term for blended finance proposals. To ensure that young people in particular benefit from these and other stimulus measures, we have identified several growth sectors which have a high potential to absorb young people. We are engaging with these sectors, including tourism and agriculture, Further work is underway through the enhanced industrial policy to encourage new models. Government has also stepped up its work to improve investment climate in our country. Our inaugural investment conference, which was held in October of last year, drew commitments of 300 billion rand. We will host the second investment conference in November, and I encourage the provinces to work with Invest SA, the IDC and others to ensure that the regional opportunities are presented to investors as well. There are several related initiatives by government to leverage opportunities presented by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In April this year, I appointed the members of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We've also published the final policy on licensing of high-demand spectrum. Access to data is an important element of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Competition Commission has been working with the mobile network operators to look at how price-based competition in mobile markets can be improved. At the time that I announced the stimulus and recovery package, the economic data showed that South Africa was in a recession. Since then, the economy has grown, though still not at the level that we wanted to grow, but we are beginning to see some green shoots. And incorporating many of the measures that we are taking, the strategy that we are going to put out is expected to place our economy on a new trajectory of growth. As I said, we will be coming out with the clear details of have the Treasury paper that was published, including a whole number of other elements that are going to have to be embarked upon to inject growth into our economy, will converge into this strategy as we will be presenting it in the next few weeks ahead of the medium-term budget statement. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honorable Koia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me welcome the detailed response by the Honorable President. However, I need to say that it's sad that I didn't hear the mention of the Northern Cape in the list of projects that he has mentioned. And I would have loved to hear the Northern Cape. However, the follow-up, Honorable President, is in relation to the 15 billion that was set aside in the reprioritization budget, particularly for infrastructure. I want to check, Honorable President, if maybe government has already identified priority areas where those projects will take place, and also what that means in practical terms. And then as a follow-up as well, the President was in the Northern Cape not very long ago in the Heritage Day celebrations. And the Premier of the Northern Cape was clear in terms of raising the challenges of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, especially with regards to the rural areas. So we want to check if there is any strategy or intentions to develop a strategy for connectivity in the rural areas so that we can be able to take ICT to the rural areas so that people of the rural areas can be able to access, one, in terms of the creation of jobs, as well as bringing them into the mainstream of the economy in the country. And lastly, President, in terms of the investment summit, the outcomes, we were happy to learn that the bulk of those investors are local investors. But we would be interested to hear the President's view in terms of the assessment of the international investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Northern Cape may not have been mentioned in those projects, but the Northern Cape stands out as a very special province in as far as our focus is concerned. And we're working very closely with the provincial government to identify the areas in which we can have rapid results and rapid growth. And the provincial government and the Premier is actively involved with us to develop the investment book for the Northern Cape. And that investment book will identify all those areas where all these funds that we have said should be released for infrastructure and other projects should be able to go. So we are keeping a very close eye on developments of an infrastructure nature for the Northern Cape, but also of a growth nature. Mining remains one of the key growth drivers for the Northern Cape, and we're also looking at how mining as well as infrastructure can be utilized to generate more growth in the Northern Cape. On the fourth industrial revolution, particularly when it comes to the issue of connectivity, we are insisting that as we will release the spectrum, as we will have more broadband, we want to focus more attention on the rural areas, because the rural areas are often most neglected by operators, by the private sector and others, and we are saying that is exactly where we want more focus to be, because there should be no area or region in our country that is left behind. With regard to international investors, last year when we held our investment conference, we had a very good mixture of both international and local. And as you correctly say, the local were in greater number, the companies that made commitments. And I'm pleased to say that a number of those companies have lived up to the commitments that they've made. And some of them, the international ones, are also living up to it. In a few weeks' time, we will be launching an investment that was announced, a new investment that was announced at the investment conference that is being made by an international entity, which is very good. We want, obviously, to be more and more attractive to international investment. And our indications are South Africa continues to have the lion's share of the inflow of foreign direct investment into the African continent. And last year was a particularly good year for South Africa, and we would like to bolster our positioning so that we continue to remain an attractive destination for investment. It is for this reason that we are focusing on the ease of doing business. As you look at this paper from Treasury, it focuses on removing all the constraints, all the blockages, and ensure that South Africa does become a country where there is ease of doing business. And if we do that, we're then able to attract more and more investors to our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Honorable Detroit, who will be followed by Honorable Landsman, and then Ndatemletsana.
Chair, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, but I raised my hand on the previous question, and then I was cut short and overlooked. I think it's misunderstanding. It's maybe someone else in this section. Thank you.
Maybe Mr. Land.
Honourable Chair, Lont and Landman is close enough, so I will take that question. Thank you so much. Honourable President, the stimulus package that was announced in September 2018, since then we've lurched from call to bail out state-owned enterprises. But there's still a gaping wound being left in our economy. We don't seem to be able to really make sure that these state-owned enterprises work as they should. But, Honourable President, there's a huge, huge concern that I've got. In Mossel Bay in the Southern Cape, there's the third largest gas-to-liquid refinery in the world that's still operational. End of next year, they're going to close down. There's 1,500 jobs that we're going to lose. Many, many more indirect jobs that we're also going to lose. I want to know, what proactive steps are you taking to attract foreign investments or local investors specifically for Petro SA and the Southern Cape, with the emphasis we've got in supporting the rural economy, so that whether that's building partnerships with private companies, what are you doing everything in your power to ensure that not a single job opportunity will be lost in that economic driver in the Southern Cape? I thank you.
Honourable Chairperson, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Minister Mantashe, is spending quite a lot of time talking to a number of players in the private sector, and some of the efforts that he's making are aimed at addressing precisely the challenge that the Honourable Member has raised, with a view of seeing how best the real problem that we are going to face when we run out of gas, how we will address that, and whether we can restructure Petro SA in a way where we ensure that either we find a new resource or we don't lose the jobs that we could lose there. He is spending quite a lot of time, and he said, President, I'm attending to this problem and I will come and brief you about the efforts that we can make in that regard. So the jobs of the workers in Petro SA remain prominent in our minds and in our heads, and we will be seeking to do everything that we can. The challenge, of course, that we face is that the gas that was being exploited there is a depleting and a wasting resource. And in order to ensure that you address the problem, you've got either to find a new source, to renew that, so that this third largest refinery that you're talking about remains a valuable asset for the people of South Africa. So we are quite aware of this challenge, and we will be seeking to do that. I will be going there myself at some stage to go and see how best we can lend a hand in the challenge that our people are going to be facing there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person is Landsman, Honorable Landsman.
Chair. I think it's the sabotage of without land. Honourable President, good days, Mr. President. In Denville, where I come from, Denville Mafikeng, there's a Denville in Gauteng also, in Northwest Mafikeng. People would to ask the President whether, in view of the fact that the Job Summit brought about an agreement to extend the employment tax incentive for another 10 years, has government already worked out modalities for implementation of this agreement? If not, why not? If so, what are the relevant details? Ek is Eric Landsman, Mr. President, a man sonder land.
Ek is baie bly om te hoor. Yes, as part of the Job Summit undertakings, it's been agreed that the tax should be extended for another 10 years. This tax has been found to be very beneficial. It has yielded more benefits than we actually talk about, because it's been able to bring in quite a number of young people into the job situation. And the modalities is what is now being reworked and refashioned, as I know. But all that is going to come back to the Jobs Summit Presidential Committee. The Deputy President and myself decided that we are going to focus on issues of job creation, and that every first Monday of the month, of the new month, we will go to NEDLAC, bring together all those partners who were part of the Job Summit agreement, so that we all get to hear the progress that is being made. And may I say that the last meeting that we had recorded a lot of progress that has been made. It is progress that I was most impressed with, because we're getting all the partners now to focus on various sectors of our economy and bring in the sector players to come into the meeting to outline their own challenges and difficulties, so that we find ways of addressing them without any waste of time. And one of the things that we address is the time that it takes for permits to be granted, and we are now shortening all that. And we got sector players to come and explain to us that the length of time that it takes to get water permits and all that is far too long, and we got the water people to come and explain why it should not take shorter, and we get them to make commitments that they will live up to. So we've been having wonderful sessions following the Job Summit process, and this is where we all got a sense that we're beginning to move forward. I insisted that I no longer want to hear about constraints and red tape and blockages and all that. And I said, because it's usually talk. And I said, I want the specifics. If people are complaining about water licenses that take too long, we must bring the water license people to come and explain to us why it is taking long. In a way, put their feet to the fire and say, why can't you cut it down? And we were very pleased to hear the water license people, for example, I'm just choosing them, saying that they are now able to cut the water license applications down quite considerably. Now I've said to them, bring me what you used to do in the past and what you're going to do. I want to see what the percentage is, because I literally want a 70% cut in waiting time, if not more. So we're beginning to gain traction on issues that have been causing problems, and I've challenged the private sector. I've said, come forward with the issues that are causing problems. And we want practical things. We just don't want newspaper headline talk. We want the things that now need to be done to turn the economy around. And I believe we are arriving at that moment when we will turn this economy around, the real economy for that matter. Thank you very much.
Ke a leboha modulasetulo. Mopresidente, o ile wa bitsa pitso ya Job Summit. Wa boela wa bitsa pitso ya Investment Summit. Wa boela wa kgetha Special Investment Envoy e eteletsweng pele ke Ntate Driver. Me, out of all those efforts, efforts includes your stimulus package. They have not led to any improvements to the economy, job creation, and reduction of poverty. Because your misguided mentality is that we will grow the economy through foreign direct investment, with the state sitting on the sideline, not doing anything. Where have you ever seen
economic growth without state playing the central role. Ke a leboha.
Ke a leboha mohlomphehi, Chairperson. Ke a leboha mohlomphehi, ke utlwile hantle ntho e buang. Our state plays a key role in the economy of our country. And the challenges that we have had in terms of getting the state to play its best role have been challenges of state capture, where those entities that are meant to play the key driving role have been weakened. Our Eskom, which we were talking about earlier, has been weakened. But prior to it being weakened, Eskom was able to play a sterling role in driving the electricity project in our country. You'll remember prior to 1994, very few people in our country had electricity, and Eskom was able to spread electrification connections throughout the length and the breadth of our country, and made it a point that many of our people have electricity. And similarly, Transnet, which also plays a key role in our economy, has been able to lead modernization efforts in a number of places where it operates, our ports, freight, rail, and so forth. Sandral, which builds our roads. The country is what it is today in terms of road network, largely because Sandral has played that key role. Sandral now faces challenges because of the debt that it carries for a number of reasons where there has not been sufficient payment. So I can count quite a number. The state has been playing a key role in the economy of our country. Now we've reached a stage where our own resources as a state have become constrained. And because our resources have become constrained, the state, which is supposed to play, yes, that key role and leading role, has been slowed down. And the reason why we are trying to increase the capability of the state, to reposition the state, is to enable the state to continue playing that very key and critical role. The state should be an entrepreneurial state. It should be an innovative state. It should be a leading state and be able to encourage the private sector to invest. Now, 70% of our economy is private sector led. That is a reality that we cannot run away from. But the state playing that 30% role in our economy has been able to play a very critical role, and the improvements that we see with housing, with hospitals, with water reticulation, with electricity, the roads and all that. Who's done it? It is the state that has been leading the role. And in doing so, it has actually been driving economic growth. The building of more than 4 million houses has happened because the state played that role, and that what came with it was economic growth. Yes, manufacturing had to happen for bricks, for cement, and all that. So I think it is a fallacy to think that the state in our country is not playing a role. It has always played a role and wants to continue playing the role. Under this administration, the state will play a leading role, an innovative role, an entrepreneurial role, and the state will show the way. But it will also be seeking to work with the private sector and encourage the private sector to invest. We want to crowd the private sector in to invest as much as possible. So we see ourselves as a state that leads, but we see ourselves as a state that also works with other role players, and particularly the private sector and labor. So that is how we want the state to be seen and the role that it should play. So how mmuso ona a ona karolo e o bapalang ka nnete hae a hona nnete mono a ke ba tlo bua ntho e tsileng tsileng ke re ke leshano empa a hona nnete e feletseng mono ke a leboha.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'll now move over to a question on victims of asbestosis, which is question 4 from Honorable M.O. Makause. We'll ask the President to respond.
The Asbestos Relief Trust and the Kalahari Relief Trust were established following a settlement that was reached in a litigation instituted by mine workers and the Genco group of companies. These trusts facilitated payment of compensation to qualifying mine workers who suffered with asbestos-related diseases. The settlement in the amount of 650 million, which was made an order of court, was a private matter to which the state was not a party. A group of aggrieved individuals, the Kgatelopele asbestos community, approached government complaining that they did not receive compensation from the Asbestos Relief Trust. Their complaint is premised on the role that they played during the litigation, in that their names were used in bringing the litigation which led to the successful conclusion of the settlement. The community has since approached the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy with a request for assistance. The department convened a meeting between the community and Mr. Richard Spoor, who was involved in the aforesaid litigation and settlement. A memorandum of understanding was signed in which Mr. Spoor undertook to assist the community to make submissions to the Asbestos Trust and the Kalahari Relief Trust to consider making payments to persons whose names were used to successfully conclude the settlement of claims. Mr. Spoor further undertook to finalize these submissions within 3 to 6 months from 20th August 2019 and to provide monthly updates to the department. Since government has brought the parties together to facilitate a resolution to the matter, it is recommended that the relevant departments must be updated regularly by the parties on the progress to resolve this matter. So I believe that this matter is being reviewed with a view of ensuring that it is resolved and that there should be justice that will be meted out to the people who feel aggrieved at this point in time. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honorable Makause.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. President, the communities and the victims needs urgent attention of government relating to this matter. This matter has been running for quite a very long time. We note the commitment towards this for settlement, and we also note that companies have taken responsibility. But, Mr. President, families have died, mothers, breadwinners have died, and some of the victims continue to suffer without any compensation. What role does government play in terms of regulating payments of these victims? And the companies that are appointed to administer such funds, their track record is dodgy, it's questionable, like Richard Spoor Incorporated. These companies have actually admitted that they were at fault. What does government at this stage planning to take actions against these companies? Because we believe that these companies should be prosecuted and jailed because our people continue to suffer the fate. Thank you.
Chairperson, thank you. As I said in my initial reply, this matter was the result of a litigation that was instituted at a private level where government was not involved. And there was a settlement, and following that settlement, things have not worked as well as they should have. And an appeal has now been made to government. And as I indicated, government is now going to monitor the implementation of the agreement that has been arrived at. So we will be an interested party to make sure that there is justice for our people. Now, had we been a litigant in the whole process, we would have been more actively involved right from the word go. But we were not, and we only come in later when there are problems. So now that the matter has been raised with us, we've now become aware, and we are now going to ensure that we keep close to this and we get updates and ensure that what has been agreed to and committed does become something that is implemented. But your point is well made. Our task as a government, obviously, is to ensure that our people are not taken for a ride, they are not cheated, they are not robbed of what is due to them, particularly people who have suffered in this way as a result of what happened in the mining industry, the asbestosis claims and all that. So we will be prepared and willing to follow that up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We'll now move over to Honorable Kahia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We just want to bring to the President's attention the importance of this particular matter and emphasize it. That indeed many lives have been lost. We want to emphasize that and are still continuing to be lost. But what we wanted to check with the President, is it possible that as the Department of Mineral Resources gets updates, they keep dynamic contact with those victims so that they are brought on board in terms of the developments, but also taking it further to check if there are possibilities of the bar investigating this particular matter, particularly on the allegations of misappropriation of these funds by the parties in leadership. So those are the two things that we wanted to check, President. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think the answer to that is yes. We will, as I said in my initial reply, will want to be kept informed of this, and we will want to follow the money, as it were, and see exactly how that has been done, because there are problems here, and I think let's wait for all the reports to be brought, and we will communicate with the ministry, ensure that the minister does follow this up, which in a way should not be that difficult to do, particularly in view of the fact that the lawyers who've been involved and the trustees who've been involved have said that they will give us updated reports. So we will be waiting for those updated reports. And where there is malfeasance and foul play, obviously those should be taken up with the various bodies, whether it is the bar or any other entity, that should be taken up. And indeed, if there is any crime that has been committed, that needs to be followed up as well. So I'm confident that this matter, having come to light, will now be followed up at the ministerial level, and we will make sure that we get to the bottom of all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Morentia, Honorable Morentia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. President, you have answered the question. I don't have a question, but I think getting the opportunity, I just need to thank you for the way in which you handled the situation of the people of the Northern Cape, because this asbestos issue is really killing our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no other question, we'll move over to question 5. Asked by Honorable C. Labuskachne on plans to reduce gender-based violence. So let's see that. Many hands. Malala. There are too many hands. and the limit is 4 honorable members. Yes, we will then allow the President to proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable members, a vital pillar of our emergency action plan on gender-based violence is to strengthen the criminal justice system. This is to ensure that justice is served. This is also to ensure that perpetrators are held to account, that survivors do not suffer secondary victimization, and that the law does act as a deterrent. In pursuit of these goals, members of the South African Police Service undergo training programs to professionally assist victims of gender-based violence. This training includes programs on children and youth at risk, domestic violence, vulnerable children, victim empowerment, and a first responder to sexual offenses learning program. More than 5,000 members have been trained since April 2019. In addition, there is an initiative to train and capacitate female South African Police Service members who are placed at client service centers on the sexual offenses for investigators learning program. This training is aimed at creating a conducive setting for gender-based violence victims, especially female victims who find it difficult to report such crimes to male officers. In addition to these measures undertaken by the police, the Department of Social Development and the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities have put in place a package of social services to improve investigations and increase conviction rates of offenders. Government is providing funding to NGOs operating in some police stations to provide counseling and psychosocial services to the victims of violence. Among other things, this is meant to enable victims to give quality statements and reduce the number of cases later withdrawn by victims. Government is recruiting more social workers to reduce the huge workload for the police and social workers. The Department of Social Development is currently managing the Gender-Based Violence Command Center, which provides online counseling services such as trauma, debriefing, and psychosocial support. And there is a toll-free number that people can phone. The Gender-Based Violence Command Center is a partnership with the private sector. It is imperative that other private sector institutions also work with the government to raise awareness of gender-based violence in this manner. As outlined during the joint sitting of Parliament on the 18th of September 2019, we are committed to enhancing the safety of women in our country as a matter of urgency by making the necessary amendments to our laws and policies with a view of ensuring that perpetrators of gender-based violence are really brought to book. Government is making substantial additional funding available for a comprehensive package of interventions to make an immediate and lasting difference. These interventions are being implemented across several departments as we speak, with monitoring and evaluation systems being put in place to ensure fast and effective progress. I thank you.
Honorable Absnachne.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for the feedback on the mechanisms to improve the quality of investigations and convictions of gender-based violence offenders. As you well know, the Western Cape Province implemented a new safety plan where they appointed 3,000 new enforcement officers and 150 investigators to prepare dockets. Furthermore, each minister has been assigned a safety priority for which they undertook to be accountable. So, Mr. President, the police minister, Mr. Bekacheli, told the National Assembly last month that by the 14th of October, which is next Monday, all police stations across this country will have sufficient rape kits. So I would like to know from you, will you give us the undertaking today that there will be at least one rape kit for children and one rape kit for adults in each police station across the country by Monday, the 14th of October?
Thank you, Chairperson. The issue of rape kits was raised during the joint sitting. We realized that there were quite a number of police stations in our country that do not have the kits and the rape kits that are essential to ensure that we immediately address the question of rapes that are perpetrated against women and children. And we are now on a drive to make sure that each police station, as you correctly say, does have its own rape kits. And I will be monitoring this myself because it is a matter that was raised by women. The women of our country raised this with me and asked me as president to make sure that there are rape kits in all the police stations. And it was a directive from myself to the minister that that should be the case. So I will be following this up and to make sure that it does indeed become a reality. Because it has been found that the police stations that do not have the rape kits are not able to administer the necessary care to rape victims. And this is a weakness that we want to address, and we will make sure that it does happen indeed. So yes, we'll make sure it happens. Thank you very much.
Honorable Matebula.
Mr. President, ba akatiko bale makai. Ku va va kota ku pfuneka va famba mpfhuka wo leha emhaka ku titliliniki na ti-police station ta le makaya ta pfala na madyambu. Xikombiso ni ta mi nyika xikombiso hi police station community police station ye le ka Dzumeri a Giyani a Limpopo under Greater Giyani municipality. Yi pfula na nhlekani ntsena na madyambu ya pfala. Hi tihi tindlela leti mi ti tirhisaka president or leti mi nga ta ti tirhisa ku ti-police station na titliliniki ti pfula 24 hours ku vaakatiko va kota ku pfunekela kusuhani na case.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Yes.
Na swi twa na swi tiva ku ri ku na titliliniki letin'wana leti nga pfuliku namadyambu ta pfala hi va ma 5 leswi swa ti-police station yin'wana na yin'wana yi fanele ku ri yi pfula 24 hours loko yi nga pfuli 24 hours yi ta ri i police station ya njhani hi ku vanhu va ku na swilo swo tala leswi swi endlekaka vanhu va lava ku ri va ya police station so hi ta swi langutisa swaleswo swa ti-police station ku sungula leswi swa titliliniki naswona swi ta fanela ku ri hi swi languta kahle hi ku tin'wani titliliniki ta pfula nkarhi wo lehanyana letin'wani na swi tiva ku ri ti pfala hi va 5 and i problem leyi ya ku ri vatirhi ku fanele ku ri ku tshamiwa na vona na ti-union ta vona ku buliwa na vona hi ku loko yi swi endla ku ri i pfula 24 hours swi vula ku ri fanele ku va na 3 shifts 8 hours na vusiku 8 hours yin'wana so swi fanele ku ri ku vulavuliwa na ti-union ta vona hi twa ku ri hi nga yi solva njhani problem yaleyi hi ku a swi tsakisi ku ri swa ku sungula ku ri police station i nga pfuli 24 hours yona yi fanele ku ri swa boha ku ri i pfula 24 hours and loko clinic yona i pfula longer hours that will be desirable so yi ta swi languta na swona ni kombela ku mi nyika homework na swi languta kahle hi vona ku ri hi nga swi lunghisa njhani particularly when it comes to gender-based violence cases our people do need to know that they can run to a clinic and indeed a police station at any time because a clinic and a police station must be places of refuge where our people can go to and be properly served. So we will look at that and see how best we can ensure that there is more opening. Now, when I went to the Home Affairs Office, this I want to share. When I went to the Home Affairs Office, we opened the Home Affairs Office in Maponya Mall in Soweto. And it's meant to work throughout the week and also the weekend. And the workers and their unions felt that they needed to be paid overtime to work on the weekend, and felt that unless there could be an agreement that they'll get their overtime, they wouldn't be willing to work. And when the department did its own calculations, it found that this would be like almost permanent overtime, and it would bring too much stress on its salary budget, and felt that it could not easily accommodate it. And as it is now, the salary budget of the Department of Home Affairs is tilted way too high compared to what they should be able to do for capital investment. And in talking to the unions, they said, if you don't agree to pay us overtime, then we won't work. And as a result, this facility, which I went to 2-3 years ago and found it an absolutely fantastic facility, which is in a shopping mall, right in the township, a modern service facility which incorporates the various departments of government, including labor, including home affairs, including social development and many others. Now I was told that it does not open over weekends. And it actually militates against the intention that we had, because the reason we opened it in a mall was that people go to the mall over weekends. That's when they have time to go and get government services. Now, it does not open, and I have said that we now need to talk to the unions so that we get unions to agree to get time off. that if those who are delineated to work over the weekend are able to get time off during the week, so that we work on a rotation basis, rather than just have a facility like that closed completely because the state cannot pay overtime. So the issue that you are raising raises those types of issues that we need to discuss with our labor partners. And we need to talk to them and negotiate with them and see exactly how all of us can be committed to continue giving service to the people of our country. So the matters that you've raised will be addressed, will be attended to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Yes, Muller.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Honorable President, for your response. Honorable President, in light of the fact that it is a well-established fact that the gender-based violence pandemic in South Africa is rooted in unequal power in gender relations, patriarchy, homophobia, sexism, harmful discriminatory beliefs and practices that continue to view women as sex objects and of lesser importance, not only in our society, but throughout the globe. What processes has the government put in place to address these proven root causes of gender-based violence, especially in building a new generation of men who respect women and treat them with utmost dignity and value? I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I thank you, Honorable Member, because you have just touched on the key issues that we need to address. Much of what we address are the after effects. We're dealing with acts that have happened and manifest themselves through either rapes or killings, and the abuse of women, and the total disregard of the importance and the dignity of women. And we are saying clearly there needs to be a particular regeneration, particular culture change, which will firstly need to focus on men. And we need to look at them as young boys, just right from the age when they are young boys, and be able to inculcate particular orientation in young boys for the respect of women, the respect of the dignity of women and the role that they have to play in society. But clearly, in society as well, we've got to address this demon of patriarchy, where men believe that they are the beginning and the end of everything that's good in the world, and that they own women and they can control women. We need to send a very clear message that there is no man who owns a woman. Women belong to no one, and especially to no man at all. And we need to be stressing that men must respect women and must treat them with dignity and with a great deal of respect. But that we need to start this off from young men. And so therefore, there are a number of organizations that have already started this process that we need to strengthen, where they are focusing on young boys and trying to raise that level of consciousness in young boys. But clearly we need to do it amongst older men as well. So we need to launch a massive campaign amongst older men as well, that they should know that gender-based violence will never be tolerated in South Africa, and we should do things that will act as a deterrent, that should prevent them from wanting to abuse women. And that is why we are also focusing on the criminal justice system. Make sure that the criminal justice system is effective and efficient enough as to act as a deterrent. And that is why when the women of our country raise the issue of, if you rape, you must know that you get life, and life means life. And if you kill a woman, you must know that you'll get life, and life means life. It means you never come out of jail. So hoping that that in itself acts as a deterrent, we still need to do quite a lot of work amongst men, amongst young men, and indeed older men as well, because that is where the patriarchy is to be found, where men believe that they are much more superior than women. So it is a process and a struggle that we must embark upon. That's why we call on all society to join us in this, to make sure that in the end, the women of our country are given the dignity that they deserve, and that their rights are also respected and promoted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary question goes to Honorable Christian.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. President, it is vital that we professionalize and train our police. However, the police to population ratio is an indicator of just how off track we are at the moment. In South Africa, the 2018 national ratio was almost half of the minimum acceptable level, according to the UN. Unsurprisingly, these police stations with the highest police to population ratios also have some of the highest crime statistics in our country. In your gender-based violence debate, you promised allocating 1.1 billion nationally to tackle gender-based violence. The Western Cape government has allocated 1 billion to just one province. The police don't have the capacity to fight crime. And do you honestly expect then that 1 billion would be adequate for 9 provinces? Have you also, Mr. President, given each of your ministers a specific target in this regard? And will you measure to ensure that these targets are met? And if they are not met, Mr. President, will you hold them accountable? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Chairperson, yes, thank you. Clearly, the 1 billion is not adequate. We conceded that, and we concede it now. And the issue came in between budgetary periods. And we have said we are going to amass and aggregate this money from all the departments in government, because there is money there that can be utilized for this task. And that is precisely what we're going to do. But what this then does, it leads us to looking at the budgeting process through different eyes, because we are facing a massive, massive crisis of gender-based violence in our country. We need to budget in a much smarter way. But utilizing this 1 billion, which we will be able to agglomerate from all the departments, we will be able to channel it for effective use. Of course, the Western Cape is utilizing it more broadly for crime fighting. We want to allocate this amount of money for gender-based violence projects that we need to embark upon. You're absolutely right. The ratio between population and the police is we are one of the weakest in the world. And that is where the real challenge for us is. And we need to correct that. The Minister of Police has been raising this quite consistently. And it's a matter that we are addressing right now. Will we hold our ministers accountable? The answer is yes. We do expect our ministers to act in accordance with the commitments that they have made, and in fact in accordance with the plans that they've put in place and the agreements that they've also signed. So they will be held accountable. They will be expected to act and make sure that what they have committed to is achievable. But at the same time, all this has demonstrated the seriousness with which we need to approach this matter. I can assure everyone that we're now focusing on addressing the gender-based violence issue, and we no longer view it as an issue that should be addressed by women of our country alone. It is a broad societal matter, and it is also being driven from the President's office, and we are going to make sure that we do indeed gain some traction in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The last question is question 6, that deals with strategic economic interventions. And the question is being raised by Honorable S.J. Mohai. Mr. President.
Honorable Chairperson, thank you. Trade tensions have contributed to uncertainty and slow growth in the global economy. This has negatively affected our own country and indeed many other countries around the world. The decision by the US to increase tariffs on steel and aluminium imports has had a direct impact on our own country. In response, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition has presented a series of submissions to the US authorities to exclude our goods and products from these duties, as South African exports do not pose a national security threat to the United States. While South Africa has not obtained a country exemption, the government's intervention has achieved important relief for the industry in the form of product-level exemptions on 36 steel and 161 aluminium tariff lines. We continue to raise our concerns about these duties with our US counterparts, particularly as it relates to the potential for job losses in South Africa. More widely, we continuously encourage the large trading nations to seek a resolution to their differences in appropriate multilateral trade forums and within the context of the rules-based trading system of the world. In an effort to diversify trade towards the African continent, South Africa played a leading role in guiding negotiations around the establishment of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The South African government's approach is based on developmental and investment-led African economic integration. The AfCFTA will in time create a market of 1.2 billion consumers with a combined GDP of over $3 trillion. As South Africa exports mainly value-added manufactured goods to the African continent, the AfCFTA represents an important additional source of export market development against the background of the trade tensions that are taking place amongst the major economies of the world. The agreement will fundamentally reshape our own economy, and as it is also expected to reshape the economies of various other countries on our continent. Already exports to other African countries support about 250,000 jobs, and it is the fastest growing part of our manufactured exports. We are working with other African countries to finalize the detailed modalities and benefits of the AfCFTA. Beyond Africa, we are working to increase the volume as well as to address composition of our exports, to shift from simply selling raw materials to the rest of the world and importing finished goods from various countries in the world. South Africa, along with 5 other countries in the Southern African region, has concluded a new trade agreement with the United Kingdom in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Without such a trade agreement, a no-deal Brexit would have a negative impact on the South African economy, but more importantly on the jobs and exports. The UK remains one of South Africa's key trading partners. In 2018, the UK was the 4th largest destination for South African exports, with bilateral trade between the two countries amounting to more than 140 billion rand. An exit in which the UK leaves the EU without any agreement of succession would add significant additional costs to the exporting and importing of goods. This would impact a range of industries, including our motor vehicles, our auto components sectors, the wine and the food sector as well. In some cases, this may lead to a loss of exports completely. The new agreement will effectively replicate the terms of trade present in the existing SADC-EU Economic Partnership Agreement in respect of tariffs, of quotas, of rules of origin, and health and safety regulations. This agreement is important for the thousands of South African workers whose jobs are dependent on trade, and particularly this trade, and for investors who have utilized South Africa as an export base to the UK and to the rest of the world. So these matters are being dealt with the seriousness that they deserve, because we want to forestall any calamity that would descend on our own country and affect the livelihoods of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you, Comrade President, for your response and providing context to the raging trade wars between China and the US, and also noting the ongoing negotiations, of course, a very complex trade issues. Mr. President, in the light of the fact that China is our strategic partner in BRICS, what role does South Africa, and by extension the African Union, envisage to play, or is playing currently, to mitigate the possible negative effects of trade war? I'm raising this within the context of African economies being vulnerable to these trade factors. Is there space for meaningful industrialization, particularly the manufacturing sector, that has potential for large employment, or creating large employment to many people? Thanks, Chairperson.
Order.
Thank you, Chairperson. On a point of order, I would just like to request that you rule that the Chief Whip address the President properly and not as Comrade President. This is not a Stalinist rally. Thank you.
That's not a point of order. And that being the case, let's proceed. Honorable President.
Thank you, Chairperson. I rather like the term comrade, because comrade is a brother, is a friend, is an ally, is a fighter. So it's all those wonderful things. So when somebody says comrade to me, it really tickles me. It does tickle me. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Muhai, yes, the important thing for us is to make sure that we consolidate our alliances with those that we share common views and vision with. And in this case, China, as part of BRICS, happens to be falling in that category. We not only do that because we belong to BRICS together, but because we have the same views and objectives and subscribe to the principles of a multilateral system in the world and a rules-based system where we are able to cooperate and collaborate more effectively in multilateral organizations and share views and where there is no unilateralism. And when it comes to how we can further boost our own economic growth situation, obviously we look forward to the associations that we have around the world, and BRICS is one of those, and indeed the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement stands out as one that is going to be beneficial to South Africa in the form of helping us to further industrialize or to re-industrialize. Because what this does is it opens up a market of almost $3 trillion, a market that we have the platform, the foundation, and the capability to be able to play in. We are more industrialized than our sister countries on the continent, and we believe that we can, as we trade together, they trading with us and us trading with them, we can be able to exchange knowledge, technologies, and even investments. We would like to see them investing in South Africa and us investing in their countries, the rest of the continent. Yes, we'd like to see them build factories here and us building factories elsewhere on the continent, making goods that can be traded throughout the entire continent. So we see this as a great opportunity for South Africa, great opportunities for our companies, and a great opportunity for our government to sharpen its own diplomatic capability as we deal with other countries. And in many ways, that is what fueled our decision to send envoys into the rest of the continent following the events of the past few weeks in our own country. And we were seeking to reposition ourselves as a trusted partner, as a partner that can deal with the continent at a number of levels. And obviously, our intention is to protect our own interests as a nation, as a country, but as we do so, we also want to promote the interests of the rest of the continent. And it is for that reason that we were able to enter into this free trade agreement so that we can work together with the rest of the countries on our continent. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Ockham.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable President, thank you very much for taking this question. With regards to the strategic interventions in our economy and domestic industries, I would like to point out that the extreme drought in the Northern Cape that has been prevailing for the last 5 years has reached a pinnacle. The people are really suffering there, Mr. President. It will lead to job losses of more than 62,000 jobs, this drought. If we don't receive higher than expected rainfall very soon, there will be more than 1 million cattle that would have starved by the end of this year in the Northern Cape. I'm not talking about sheep and wildlife. That's only cattle. The farmers in the Northern Cape are really suffering. The Northern Cape is in desperate need, Mr. President, of strategic interventions to protect the economy and the farming industry. Geachte president, die boere in die Noord-Kaap is die ruggraat van die ekonomie in die Noord-Kaap. En daardie boere het nodig dat u die Noord-Kaap spoedig as 'n droogte-rampgebied verklaar. My vraag aan u is, wanneer gaan u dit doen? And how can we then put in the required budget and legislation to action this mitigating drought, the mitigating effects on this drought that we so desperately need? Meneer die president, die boere in die Noord-Kaap het u vandag nodig. En hulle het nodig dat u hierdie droogte in die Noord-Kaap tot 'n droogte-rampgebied verklaar so spoedig as moontlik. Baie dankie.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The Deputy President visited the Northern Cape a few days ago. And he gave me a report that was not pleasing at all, that the drought is having a devastating effect. We're going to be discussing that report more fully to see what interventions can be made. We were also going to discuss it with the government of the Northern Cape, the Premier, as well. We are well aware of the dire situation in the Northern Cape that will affect jobs, and you are saying 63,000 jobs, but it will also affect a number of livelihoods. So we are well aware of that. Evil weet wanneer gaan ek dit doen? Ons sal nou eers praat, mooi gesels in government, and thereafter together with the Northern Cape government, and we'll see what measures that we are able to come up with. But thank you very much for raising the matter. Thank you. Bye, Dankie.
Thank you very much, Honorable President. That was the last question. I see your hand is now up. You'll be the last person.
The robbing game straight. Thank you.
There's only one spot left. Brian.
Can I proceed, Chair? Chairperson?
Yes, please proceed.
All right. Thank you, Chairperson. President, since in 1993, actually, to be precise, the manufacturing sector was contributing about 23% to the GDP. And fast forward to 2019, especially as in today, the manufacturing sector is contributing about 13% to the GDP. And by the look of things, by 2030, it's going to be possible that it might end up contributing, say, about 5%. And that is because of two reasons. The first reason is the failure by the government to protect the manufacturing sector. And the second reason will be the failure by the government to stimulate the domestic demands of the goods that are being used on a daily basis by people. So now, and as government, we continue to buy some of these domestic things from countries like China, India, etc. So why is the government not establishing a manufacturing company that will cater for those domestic goods that we use on a daily basis? Because as government, we even buy linen for our own hospitals from China. So why is the government not establishing a manufacturing company, especially in the rural areas where there is a lot of demand and there's a lot of unemployment, especially youth? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Clearly, the manufacturing sector in our country is under a lot of stress. And you're correct that the contribution of the manufacturing sector has gone down over the many years, but so have others. Mining used to be at a high level, it also gone down. And mining is supported by manufacturing. As soon as mining goes down, manufacturing will also go down. And we've seen tertiary going up, but at the same time, we've all been saying that we need to re-industrialize our country. And when we re-industrialize our country, it will mean that manufacturing will be re-boosted, and we will be able to see firms making goods that are bought in the local market. Now, our market is a small market. We're a small market in the broader scheme of things. But at the same time, we need to focus on manufacturing and also focus on export. We should be looking more to making goods that can be exportable. And it is for this reason that we are saying the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement offers us a $3 trillion right almost on our doorstep, market that we can exploit. And that then calls for precisely what you are saying: boost the manufacturing sector, support firms and companies that can go into manufacturing. And it is for this reason that we are supporting the Black Industrialist Program. Black industrialists who we are bringing into the industrial sector and helping to turn into manufacturers. But we're also focusing on small and medium enterprises that are manufacturing oriented. If you look at various other countries like Germany, almost 60 to almost 67% of their firms are small firms, but they are manufacturing firms. They are not your big mega firms, but small, and they drive the economy of that country. And that's precisely what we believe we should do. Government should act as a facilitator. Should facilitate, it should act as an enabler, it should act also as a regulator. And government should also provide the necessary incentives to let others be the real actors. You cite a very good example of bed linen in hospitals. Now, there is a company that we've supported as government that's run and managed by people with disabilities, and they make bed linen for most of the hospitals. Now, a number of hospitals or provinces were no longer buying from it. We're now turning them around. They used to employ quite a lot of people, then they went down. They are now being rebooted. We are now supporting them more and more so that we buy linen locally. Now, the other issue, of course, is localization. We want to focus more and more on localization to have goods that are made in South Africa so that we're able to get more and more South Africans to buy. Now, the issue of demand in our market is low. It is low, and one of the ways in which government can stimulate demand is to pump money into the economy. Now, last year, you will recall when we introduced the economic recovery and stimulus package, we did say this is a package with South African characteristics because we did not have the billions and billions that other countries have and pump money into the economy in one fashion or other that stimulate growth immediately. For us to do so, we will have to go and borrow. Right now, our resources are so stretched. Our needs that we are supporting now are so numerous. And in fact, if we want to pump money into the economy, we will have to go and borrow. And once we do that, then our borrowings go higher up and our interest rates also go higher up, and the deficit becomes unmanageable and we are downgraded, and it just leads to more and more problems. But from an economic point of view, you're absolutely right that governments should be able to stimulate demand. But right now, we don't have the resources. Last year, you will recall, we reprioritized the budgets of various departments and took money from this department, channeled it to farming, to farmers, support the farmers, support the township businesses, support the industrial parks. That money was meant to stimulate demand, but it was money that was being redirected. It was not money that was going directly into the pockets of people so that they can have disposable income to buy goods that are made in our factories. So this happens because of the economic challenges that we are facing. But your economic logic is absolutely correct to a point, but we need much more leeway, which we don't have right now. Thank you very much.
Last question. From the youngest member of the...
Thanks, Chairperson. Allow me to also join members in welcoming the President's intervention in positioning our economy in the global trade. When everything is said and done, President, would like to ask, is there monitoring and evaluation of impact of these interventions on youth, women, and people living with disabilities? And if not, why not? If so, what are the relevant details? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Yes, there is a focus on evaluation and monitoring. We are focusing our attention on what needs to be done for young people, particularly in terms of getting them to be players in the economy. We have accepted that we are facing a crisis where many of the young people in our country are unemployed, and we therefore need to do something. And we've decided that we are going to come up with a number of initiatives and measures to bring more and more young people into the world of work. And we're therefore, in the presidency, working on a number of measures, some of which will be implemented soon and in no time. When it comes to the empowerment of women, we've said that we want women to be properly empowered, and every program that we embark upon should have the women empowerment element, not forgetting people with disabilities. So all this is being focused on, and the monitoring and evaluation will be focusing on making sure that we do take positive actions in all these matters, because we should not be able to carry on knowing very well that we've got a major problem around these three. People with disabilities, they need jobs, they need to be properly economically empowered, and the Department of Women, Youth, and People with Disabilities is focusing on that. But we also want it to be a much broader societal responsibility. It should not only be balkanized in that ministry, it should be something that all of society, various institutions focus attention on. We would like to see people with disabilities being employed. And we are not seeing that happening. And I'm calling on companies and in the private sector as well as the public sector to employ people with disabilities, because they need that economic empowerment as well. Similarly, the empowerment of women should be much broader than just being a responsibility of the Department of Women and Youth and People with Disabilities. And when it comes to the youth, we are embarking on a number of programs. The National Youth Development Agency is doing phenomenal work, and they need to be supported, because they've proved that they can reach out to young people, they can come up with innovative programs for young people, and they are doing a good outreach process that impacts thousands and thousands of young people. So all these matters are matters that are being addressed and looked at on a continuous basis. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the President takes his seat, let me just emphasize on a word of appreciation to the Premier of Northwest and the Speaker of Northwest.
All right, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on SA Today. You have President Cyril Ramaphosa there finishing answering questions at the National Council of Provinces. That's your NCOP. The
legislatures who are with us today, a word of appreciation. And to continue, just to emphasize that I think we should all really also appreciate the time that the President has taken to be with all of us, and to thank the President for availing himself to take and answer our questions. That, honorable members, concludes the business of the day. And honorable members, we are requested to remain standing until the procession has left the House. The House stands adjourned.